By 1963, November 22nd, 1963, Dr. King had had his life threatened many times. In Montgomery, they bombed his home. He came up to New York to autograph a book that documented the Montgomery movement. Had been stabbed in the chest. So death was not a stranger to him. The thought of his own death was one that often came because people were threatening all the time. But I think when the president went down, I think all of us had a little lump in our throats because we knew that if they take out a president, that they can take out Martin.
I remember seeing Dr. King sitting in a very pensive kind of mood after President Kennedy was shot, watching the fallout and the feedback from that assassination. He said, this is a 10-day nation. That in 10 days, we'll be back to business as usual.
I think one of the great tributes that we can pay in memory of President Kennedy is to try to enact some of the great progressive policies that he sought to initiate.
Well, I'm going to support them all, and you can count on that, and I'm going to do my best to get other men to do likewise, and I'll have to have y'all's help. I never needed more than I do now.
Well, you know you have it, and just feel free to call on us for anything.
Thank you so much, Martin.
All right.
Call me when you're down here next time.
I certainly will.
I used to love to be at their home. He had a game he played with each child. They had a kiss mark. One child had a forehead and one had a cheek, the other had the other cheek, and the other one had the chin. And what he would do sometimes, he'd grab them and to give them a kiss, and he'd pretend like he's going to the wrong side. No, Daddy, that's my side, that's my side. And he was doing that just to add some jocular moments to the setting.
Daddy, you're not talking.
I'm too hungry, Mother. I'm so hungry, I'm busy with this dinner.
Martin had a great love for his family. People think it's glamorous to do all this traveling, but not when you travel under a terrible, high-pressure schedule. So your life becomes turbulent, and it's not your own. You belong to the people. You belong to God, and your family has to share that ownership, as painful as that may be.
All right.
In early January of '64, everybody was short-handed, and I was brought over to the White House. And Dr. King came in several times. So I would chat with him first and then take him in to see the president. And the president was anxious to hear his advice.
Johnson wanted to befriend the movement, but King was difficult for him. Martin was not an inside Washington guy. Johnson loved to deal with people. He was a checkers player. He moved these people around. He couldn't move Martin around that way. And then there was Hoover. Always sitting on Johnson's ear, spilling poison in it about Martin.
J. Edgar Hoover was the original director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. J. Edgar Hoover was more popular than most presidents. Hoover had been around longer. He was seen as a great bulwark against whatever people feared, whether it was crime or bank robbers or subversives or the atom bomb.
Dr. King was threatening to the America that Mr. Hoover believed in and saw and wanted.
Hoover, I think, had a pathological hatred of black people. And he just couldn't stand Martin.
And his biggest tool was the communist bugaboo. As a matter of fact, he persuaded Bobby Kennedy that he just had to have the right to tap Dr. King, tap his phones, and put him on under excruciating surveillance.
We received some very disturbing news about the fact that Dr. King was having his speeches written by an individual who was very closely allied with the Communist Party, who had attended meetings of the National Committee of the Communist Party, and who had given money to the Communist Party. His name was Stanley Levinson.
Stanley admitted that for a brief period of time that he had been a member of the Communist Party. That he admitted, okay? So the FBI had that information. Now what they did, though, they wiretapped all of my conversations with Martin King, all of Stanley Levinson's conversations with Dr. King, all of my conversations with Stanley Levinson. That was all subject of wiretap.
As we used to sing, ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. Ain't gonna let Bull Connor turn us around. Ain't gonna let J. Edgar Hoover turn us around. Because it was the Hoover mentality and the Hoover rationale for intimidating us to use communism. We dismissed it.
From Washington, D.C., the Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr., president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, will face the nation.
Dr. King, it's been alleged that you have been slow to sever your ties with alleged communists in the civil rights movement, even after government officials have warned you against them.
First, I'd like to say that communism is based on an ethical relativism, a metaphysical materialism, a denial of human freedom, and a crippling totalitarianism that I could never accept. The only person that they identified that had any connection with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was removed. He's been off of our staff a long, long time.
Well, this places you in the direct opposite position of the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, J. Edgar Hoover, who gave some testimony recently to the contrary.
I would hope that the FBI would come out and say something that I think is much more significant, and that is that it is amazing that so few Negroes have turned to communism in the light of that desperate plight. I think it is one of the amazing developments of the 20th century, how loyal the Negro has remained to America in spite of his long night of oppression and discrimination.
This Civil Rights Act is a challenge to all of us to go to work in our communities and our states, in our homes and in our hearts, to eliminate the last vestiges of injustice in our beloved country.
As we walked into the White House that day, into the East Room, we were just thinking, you know, this day will fulfill the aspirations of millions of our people over more than 100 years who had longed that one day the government would say, it's not right, stop it. So it was a watershed moment. And every time I look at that picture of the smile on Dr. King's face and the amazement in my own thoughts of being there, where my grandmama would have wanted to be. It was a great day.